recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. With that, we will call this regular council meeting for February 4th, 2025 to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Council, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening? CAO, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Through the mayor, no changes.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Council, Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda, regular council agenda for February 4th, 2025.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, the motion on the floor is that council adopt the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And Councillor Stashik in favor by hand. Councillor Taylor also in favor by hand, and that motion is carried unanimously. That will take us to section 3 of the agenda, council minutes for adoption, and item 3.1. Council? Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we accept regular council minutes for January 21st, 2025, and the committee of the whole meeting January 28th, 2025.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is that council adopt the meeting minutes from the regular council meeting on January 21st, 2025, and the committee of the whole January 28th, 2025. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. That motion is carried unanimously. I'll take us to section 4 of the agenda, citizens minute with council. Secretary, are there any citizens signed up for a minute with council today?
No, there's none today. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. That will move us to section 5 of the agenda today, a brief closed session for item 5.1, the appointment to the Town of Hinton Library Board. Councillor Hawes.
Like we move into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is that council move into closed session at 4:02 p.m. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we will call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council is headed into closed session. For those of you watching and those of you in the audience, this will be a few moments of closed session. We'll be back for our regular open session agenda. Thank you very much. Okay, council will return to open session. We are on, there we go. Excellent. Now, council has returned to the regular meeting for February 4th, 2025. We are on section 6 action items and item 6.1 appointment to the Town of Hinton Library Board. CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor, we're recommending that council appoints Kushi Modi to the Town of Hinton Library Board for a 3-year term.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council appoints Kushi Modi to the Town of Hinton Library Board for a 3-year term.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council appoints Kushi Modi to the Town of Hinton Library Board for a 3-year term. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. I just want to thank all of our applicants. Library Board is a worthwhile cause in our community, and everybody that steps up to participate is very valued. Thank you very much for your applications. That will take us to item 6.2 of the agenda this evening. Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 1124 TAC 1. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I will turn this over to Ms. Borbeau.
Ms. Borbeau.
Thank you. Council, this item is before you. Last you saw it would have been at the January 28th Committee of the Whole meeting where consensus was reached to bring this forward to the next regular council meeting. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Borbeau. Councillor Taylor.
Can you speak to 4.6, please? Members must not make a public statement, including spoken or written format, which speaks to a potential decision or direction of council prior to the deliberation of that decision and or direction being had at an open meeting of council.
Ms. Borbeau.
That's my job. Why would you tell me I can't do my job?
Through to all of council. 4.6 is in there, and the clarifying part behind it is directly ahead of a meeting. You should not be promoting or conferring with the public, saying what you predict council is going to come to the conclusion of at that meeting. So it's directly ahead of the meeting. It's not meant to impede or trip you up for any of your regular council duties in representing your constituents within the municipality.
Or does it say directly ahead?
Ms. Borbeau.
One moment, please. Sorry. Through to all of council, so it's prior to the deliberation of that decision or direction at the meeting of council. So that's where the distinction would come in.
CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, if I could. And to Councillor Taylor, this was a question that was posed in the Committee of the Whole. And the way that I interpret it is that this is actually discussing council stating that there's a predetermined outcome or that council is going to do this as what it's asking council not to do through the code of conduct. But because we've had a few questions on this and maybe some confusion about the interpretation, there's one change that we could make is members must not make a public statement, including in spoken or written format, which speaks to where it says a potential decision or direction of council, maybe instead of potential, maybe a predetermined decision or direction of council. Would that provide some clarity to?
Councillor Taylor.
Well, your statement has made it even more unclear to me because there's another section of this code of conduct that says we're supposed to approach decisions with an open mind. So why would we have two sections that say that, one that says it very indirectly and one that says it directly? It makes 4.6 seem totally unnecessary.
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, no, council can certainly look at those two redundant. I think this one is, I would say that the one is more about the approach of council and being being a good counselor. One is a specific topic when it comes to communicating with the public and certain parameters and talking about predetermined decisions or what you may perceive as conclusion.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. We'll go to Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just following up on Councillor Taylor's comments, and this is indeed the second meeting in a row where the concern about this clause has been brought up by a member of council. And I have to admit, I was confused too until CEO Panasic gave his interpretation of it. But seeing as how there is apparently some widespread confusion amongst councillors regarding this clause, I would be in support of some type of an amendment to make it more clear. I think it's important that that's clear to people who are considering running for council, to members of the public who are trying to determine whether a violation of the code of conduct has occurred, anything like that. I think something to bring some additional clarity to the intent of 4.6 would probably be a good idea to amend. I would be prepared to make a motion maybe, and be happy for some feedback from council and administration on wording of it, but I'd propose, or I'd move to amend section 4.6. Just have to let me know when you're ready. I can't see where you're at, Ms. Davy Campbell. To read, members must not make a public statement, comma, including in spoken or written format, comma, which speaks to a defined outcome of a potential decision or direction of council prior to the deliberation. I don't know if you have it in front of you. The rest of it's basically the same. Okay. Yeah, I think that amendment would bring some additional clarity to 4.6. As I said, though, I'm perfectly open to amendment if council or administration has some alternate wording that would be more appropriate or better clarifies it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, the motion on the floor is a council direct administration to amend section 4.6 to read, members must not make a public statement, including in spoken or written format, which speaks to a defined outcome of a potential decision or direction of council prior to something's wrong there. Yeah, prior to the deliberation. That's right. Prior to the down couple. Down another one. There you go. Council prior to the deliberation is the word that's missing. Of that decision or direction being had at an open meeting of council. I'm going to give that one more read if we can see the whole thing there. Secretary? Okay, council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to amend section 4.6 to read, members must not make a public statement, including including in spoken or written format, which speaks to a defined outcome of a potential decision or direction of council prior to the deliberation of that decision and or direction being had at an open meeting of council. Or discussion, Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I didn't have a problem with 4.6. 4.6 to me literally said we cannot say prior to the vote to anybody which way we're leaning. We can't go out there to the public and say, council is leaning in this direction. That to me is what 4.6 is saying. So I'll support this version of 4.6.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, I agree with this amendment. I was somewhat uncomfortable and confused because I realize as a counselor, we can't speak to what council will decide, but this did make it kind of muddy or murky waters into what I can say as an individual counselor on a matter. And that's where I see this is much more comfortable, because I can't speak to the defined outcome, but I can still speak to my feeling, my thoughts on an upcoming decision potentially. But it also then brings into what Councillor Taylor mentioned later on, says keeping an open mind. So I'm not saying I will decide, but this is where I'm headed. So I appreciate the words defined outcome. I think that clarifies things for me. And that's, so I'll be in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess here's my concern. Regardless of the original writing of 4.6 or the amended version, although it's rare, it is possible to have a council who essentially, forgive the term, misbehaves and comes to predetermined decisions, by way of committee of the whole, and then they sort of just run into council chambers with some predetermined decisions. So I guess my concern, the way this is written and the way the original 4.6 is written, is that if I'm the whistleblower counselor, if I'm the rogue counselor who's trying to keep an open mind and says, well, this is not how business should be done, this actually precludes me from saying we have a problem here because council's running into these meetings already having predetermined decisions. Do you know what I mean? Because what it says is members must not make a public statement, including in spoken or written format, which speaks to a defined outcome of a potential decision. So if I have 6 counselors who are just going through the motions and they say, yeah, we've decided a committee of the whole. Okay, well, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. But I have a bylaw, or pardon me, I have rules that essentially set out that you can't actually say anything about that because that's in your code of conduct. You're not supposed to speak to that. In this case, here's the problem. The more I think about this, 10.4 covers us. 10.4 says, and it's simple, members must approach decision-making with an open mind that is capable of persuasion. Simple rules are good rules. At the end of the day, that applies to all of us as council. And if I make a public or a written statement that says, well, council already determined that this is the decision we're going to make, well, I'm in violation of that, or I'm at least accusing my fellow councilors of being in violation of that. That should be investigated. And I think 4.6 has covered that. At least that's where I'm coming in at right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor.
Well, so far I've seen 3 different people speak to this with 3 different opinions as to what that means. What that means to me is must not make a public statement, including spoken or written, which speaks to a defined outcome of a potential decision or direction of council prior to deliberation. So I can't go to a member of the public and say, council's going to do this, and it could result in one of 4 things happening. Can I get your opinion on which of the 4 things that's going to happen? That, can you just give me some help and some guidance? That's what that says to me, and that's my job. Council must approach all decisions with an open mind. That's pretty clear.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the comments that have been made by some of the other councillors here that it's could still be open to some misinterpretation or to some misinterpretation. Or to limitation of a counselor's regular role. I'm just as happy to see this be defeated and then a motion made to remove 4.6 is fine. Because I do agree, I think it's covered under whatever it was, sorry, 10 point, whatever it is. Yeah, to me, 4.6 is a little bit extemporaneous, but I thought we'd, throw an attempt out there to try and make it more clear that it's about speaking to members of the public and saying, hey, this is how council's going to vote on that, just so you know. But I'm just as happy if it's not there, it's covered elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor, through to the rest of council. Just one thing to keep in mind with this one is having an open mind capable of persuasion is what's included in our legislation, and that's referred to each individual councillor. This clause I see is a little bit different, as this is about one councillor speaking to the mindset of the rest of council and saying that council is going to make this decision, where, you can always say, well, my mind is open, capable of persuasion, but council is going to do this. So, don't bother showing up for the public hearing, for example. Council's already made up their mind. To me, that's really the intent of 4.6, is trying to address that type of communications.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, CEO Panasic. I think that's where I'm headed with this one. Is I agree with all the other ones, but this specifically speaks to what is being portrayed in the community by one person. Because as long as we're very clear with the other also speaking to that, if we do speak to someone, this is of the opinion of one counselor, it's not an opinion of all council. This also then speaks to, we can't predetermine a decision, that can't make the impression that the decision has already been made. It doesn't stop us from making, as Councillor Taylor said, it doesn't stop us from making, our own thoughts on the material and the decision coming forward. But at the end of the day, when we sit down at that table, we still have an open mind to how we're going to vote on that and listen to all of our colleagues. So I think this, to me, needs to be included along with the others as well, especially if you do have a code of conduct concern. Typically there are usually a few different things, and this can be specific to, when bringing a case forward, this is what we saw, whereas the other one, did you keep an open mind? That's a little harder. So I think that's the other where I'm coming from with this one. I think it's appropriate to have this in the code of conduct. And again, I'm in favor of that wording. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To me, it's obvious that 4.6 and 10.4, two different things. 10.4 talks about having an open mind, which we all come in with. And 4.6, once again, is saying, I'm saying to the public, council is leaning in this direction. I cannot say that. So I think that's spelled out in 4.6, whether it's that one there or the existing one. Two different things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for our CAO, because I want to try and address his concerns, but in a clean way that I can understand. And it'll impact how I vote on this particular motion. So CAO, if we're just looking for simplicity, could we not just say councillors should not indicate that they know how any other councillor or council will vote?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor, yes, certainly can.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I would say that for the most part accomplishes the same end.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Taylor.
How is what you are trying to now achieve with section 4.6 different than 4.4? As a member of the community, members retain the right to make public comments and speak to the media. Members public comments or speak to the media. Members shall, when not speaking on behalf of the council, clearly state that the stated opinions are personal opinions and not necessarily represent the position of council or unduly reflect on any council decision. How is what you said different than that, please?
CO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So again, I think that, you know, in absence of this, could you rely on other sections? You know, an open mind, capable of persuasion. You know, we see, you know, saying that this is a predetermined conclusion as speaking on behalf of council. You could probably rely on other sections. If you needed to, it's just going to be a little bit more ambiguous. This is just a very specific clause related to a very specific concern that I believe that a lot of communities have ran into. So, you know, so yes, you could probably rely on other sections. It's just going to be a little bit more ambiguous. This one is just a little bit, you know, more specific and more clear to the actual issue that we're trying to address. So, but to Councillor Taylor's point, you could likely rely on 4.4 as well, based on your interpretation of 4.4, that could likely fit.
Thank you.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. I'm looking in the report and maybe I'm thinking of the committee of the whole, but was there not a mention? Yeah, that these were recommendations. I think this is where I found it. It was reviewed by administration using the Alberta Munis Councillor Code of Conduct Guide, the 2023 version. So this is where some of these or most of these changes have come from, is that Councillor Code of Conduct Guide. Is that correct?
CO Panasic.
Yes, that's correct.
And this was,
Yep.
if I may, this was one of them then that was highlighted in that guide to add?
Ms. Bourbeau, do you know?
No, I'm sorry, I cannot speak definitively to that one. I do know that both the Legislative Services Unit as well as Strategic Initiatives were looking at this, and we also had the comms consultant that did some external work for it, so do a full read and review of this, and he provided positive comments as written.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. CO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one other comment as it relates to 4.4. Typically 4.4 is one of the most weaponized clauses in any code of conduct. So you're relying on that clause, I would just provide some caution to it, because, you know, if you do have a counselor who may not be acting appropriately, they feel the, you know, you could feel the need to say anything you want under the guise of, but I clearly stated that this is not the opinion of council. So if you say this isn't the opinion of council, but then proceed to say things that are harmful to council or harmful to the town's reputation, or as in the case of 4.6, discussing, you know, predetermined outcomes before council's had an opportunity to debate in open session in proper form, that's where those types of sections get weaponized.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Councillor Haas, did you go follow up?
Yeah, if I could just do a quick follow-up. The reason I asked the question is because, I mean, if I would see this 2019 version, it'd be different, a story, but this is a 2023 version that we're working on. And a lot of these things is because of things that have happened in previous municipalities. They bring forward then ways, a guide to try and manage those. So I think, you know, under those circumstances, even though the administration can't say for certain it came from there off the cuff, but I think it's a reasonable, and I agree with the CEO that the less weaponizing, the more things we can have in there that's specific, the better off we are. So I think sometimes if we go too simple, they're too easy to use, you know, and the interpretation is then muddled as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think maybe with an additional change, we might be able to address some of the concerns about how maybe the wording could be interpreted too broadly right now. And I don't want to make an amendment to my own motion, but hear what council said. And if somebody else wanted to make the motion to amend, we could just replace the word outcome with vote decision. So it would be, which speaks to a defined vote decision of a potential, or sorry, defined vote result. Defined vote result of a potential decision or direction of council. And I think that limits it to just stating you can't speak about how you think the vote is going to turn out. If you want to talk about ramifications of if council chooses to vote this way, what's going to happen, you can still speak to it. You just can't say, no, council's already made up their mind about that. There's no point emailing council. They're already going to vote in favor. I think that helps address a little bit and makes it a little bit more clear. I'd like to hear what council has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council? Well, I'll speak to it for a moment. I believe that we're playing semantics with wording here, and regardless of how we word it, whether it's originally, whether it's the motion on the floor, or whether it's, you know, the potential small update that Councillor Stashik recommended, I think they all say the same thing. And I'm fully in support of keeping 4.6 in our document. Council, does council have anything else to discuss on the motion on the floor, which is that council direct administration to amend section 4.6 to read, members must not make a public statement, including in spoken or written format, which speaks to a defined outcome of a potential decision or direction of council prior to the deliberation of that decision or direction being had at an open meeting of council. Any further discussion? Let's get that popped up on our devices here. And we will call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is defeated as a draw 3-3 with councillors Haas, Ostashik, and Mayor Nissen voting for, and councillors Magoon, Taylor, and Race voting against. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment. Then Jen, I'll just make sure that you're good to go before I start reading.
So just to be clear, there's no motion on the floor, so this is just a motion?
Just a motion.
To amend the text rather than
amend the
amendments
text.
on
Yeah.
the motion. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'd like to amend 4.6 to read, councillors should not indicate that they know how any other councillor or council will vote prior to deliberation. That's it. So if I may, Mr. Mayor, just speaking to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think just looking for that simplicity, because I do think a big part of this is the counselor's code of conduct, not just for us, but for potential counselors. I want to respect the concern that the CAO put forward in that we're trying to ensure that people are not indicating that they know how council will vote prior to deliberation and ultimately decision. So I'm trying to find a way to capture that. And that's what's made me put forward sort of a redo of 4.6. Otherwise, I think my initial decision would have been just to drop 4.6. So I think this is capturing that. CAO spoke to it. Unless admin has any further concerns, I think this meets with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Before you turn your microphone off there, I just want to get you to confirm the wording. And I'd like to amend this wording just a brief moment. So it reads that Councillor direct administration to amend 4.6 to read. Councillors should not indicate that they know how any other counselor or council will vote prior to deliberation.
Good.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to amend 4.6 to read, councillors should not indicate that they know how any other councillor or council will vote prior to deliberation. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only concern I have is the word should. Should is not committal. It doesn't, there's nothing that individual could be held accountable if they breach that. So I think it should say will or must. I'd like to propose that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Magoon, would you take a friendly amendment to change the word should to must not?
Either of those, Councilor Stashik's right.
Thank you. And council, we're going to allow for a friendly amendment unless any councillors bring up objection. The motion on the floor will read that council direct administration to amend 4.6 to read, councillors must not indicate that they know how any other councillor or council will vote prior to deliberation. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I know it's semantics, but to align it with the rest of the wording in the bylaw, it should probably say members, not just councillors. This bylaw applies to council appointed board members as well, I believe, and I believe that's why the wording is members, not councillors. Because this would apply to them, they need to adhere to this too.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Ostashik. And I'm seeing agreement in the affirmative from Councillor Magoon. So council, once again, we're going to take a friendly amendment to the wording of the motion on the floor to change out the word councillors to members unless any councillor shows an objection at this time. Thank you. So council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to amend 4.6 to read, members must not indicate that they know how any other member or council or committee, I suppose at this point, will need to add in as well, or council or committee will vote prior to deliberation. And thank you, Councillor Ostashik, for catching all those great details. I'm seeing nods of agreement from Councillor Magoon. Any objections to the friendly amendment of the wording here? We're not seeing anything from council. Excellent. Okay, council, the motion on the floor, once again, is that council direct administration to amend 4.6 to read, members must not indicate that they know how any other member or council or committee will vote prior to deliberation. Councillor Taylor.
How would you even know that if everybody's following 10-4? Councilor Magoon?
Councillor Magoon.
I think this is a professionalism in my mind. This is a professionalism and a courtesy issue that you extend to other councillors. The case in point, if I'm having a conversation with a member of the public in the foyer and there's a contentious issue, and I essentially, I forgive the phrase, maybe I throw another councillor under the bus, so to speak, to say, well, that councillor is going to vote against what you want me to vote in favor of. I'm predetermining your decision before you've even made it. That's not fair. And that's what I heard the concern from admin was. I think it's just making sure we're giving everybody the due courtesy of, if we're all arriving with an open mind, nobody knows how a vote would go, and we've seen that a number of times where a vote has swung wildly in the course of debate. So.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor, follow up?
Oh, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And Secretary, just if you could delete the word amendment at the very start there. This is not an amendment. This is a main motion. Council, any further discussion before we call the question? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. The council direct administration to amend 4.6 to read, members must not indicate that they know how any other member or council or committee will vote prior to deliberation. Councils or councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to take I'd like to move that council take the recommended action, that council give first reading to council code of conduct bylaw number 1124-1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. And council, the motion on the floor is that council give first reading to Council Code of Conduct bylaw number 1124 TAC 1 as amended. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll just give the secretary a moment to add the word as in there. And Councillor Magoon.
Just a point of legislative clarification, Mr. Mayor. Is as amended necessary, seeing as we've already amended it? Isn't that the draft that's been put before us now?
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. CO Panasic.
Through the chair to Councillor Magoon, my preference would be to have as amended in there, because to me, the alternative is as presented. And if you're just looking at the minutes in isolation, you're going to look at the one forward. So this just indicates that there was a change.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council give first reading to Council Code of Conduct bylaw number 1124 TAC 1 as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council give second reading to Council Code of Conduct bylaw number 1124-1, please.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is that council give second reading to Council Code of Conduct bylaw number 1124 TAC 1. And I'm just going to clarify with CO Panasic for the second reading. Do you want to keep the as amended or do you want to drop it since there's been no change from first reading to second?
Through the mayor to the rest of council, I think we could maintain the as amended.
Thank you, CO Panasic. So, council, the motion on the floor is that council give second reading to Council Code of Conduct bylaw number 1124 TAC 1 as amended. Any discussion? Councillor Taylor.
I'll vote for this because at this point, I guess we need a code of conduct. But I think the goal in establishing a code of conduct is, what's the goal? Is it to make sure that the code of conduct is kept within the confines of municipalities or provincially? And if we're keen on doing number one, we should be looking at establishing clear and uniform standards of conduct to the extent possible, not trying to necessarily add so many conditions that you constrain council exactly how they do their job. Because there's a lot of discussion provincially on these things being taken away from municipalities because of how they've been used in the past. So we've got to be very careful that everything that we do goes towards that clear standard of conduct. That's my take. This, I don't think is, I think this is an improvement. That's just sort of the way I approach this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, the motion on the floor is that council give second reading to Council Code of Conduct bylaw number 1124 TAC 1 as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 6.2 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.3, branding policy and visual identity guidelines. And Ms. Bourbeau.
Thank you, Council. We have the branding policy and visual identity guidelines before you this evening. Again, I believe it was presented to committee on January 28th. There had been some questions surrounding the Gateway to the Rockies logo and the slogan and the use of. We are still researching trademarking that name. The process, once the application is completed, can take up to 2 years. So the Gateway to the Rockies logo and slogan is still in use. We have a version within the presentation that has no slogan because it's a little bit cleaner to produce in some instances. But in other areas, such as our email addresses, the slogan is still in use. Once approved, there is a full package of new templates almost ready to be released. We'll go through organization-wide training on the use of when to use all of the different templates. The templates are different enough that the the user will know at a glance if they have an old or a new version. We've done that specifically to try and eliminate the wrong letterhead or the wrong something being used inadvertently. With that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Borbeau. Counselor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council approve the draft branding pilot policy number 1207 as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council approve the draft branding policy number 1207 as presented. Counselor Taylor.
Just maybe a minor question. 411, any material change to the town's branding entity must be approved by council. Does that need to say including any budgetary implications? Because you could change something and kind of colorblind, so I'm not going to really notice what it looks like. But if it's going to cost a ton of money, then I'd like council to have a say.
Ms. Borbeau.
Through to all of council. So material changes would have to be approved by council. And if that is a visual impact, we would be bringing it forward. If it's a monetary impact, then it would definitely be done through budget, such as earlier this year when we presented the idea of a new branding policy and it was defeated because this wasn't the year to be spending those dollars. So this is a step towards achieving the goal that the comms folks wanted to do without having it be very costly for the town.
Okay, so material change does mean financial too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Taylor. Thank you, Ms. Borbeau. Counselor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question regarding legal protection. What's the current legal protection of any of the town's branding that's included in this package? And specifically referring to in the event that a third party chooses not to adhere to 4.5.1, what the remedy is for that, or if there even is one?
Ms. Borbeau.
Through to all of council, we currently have a really good relationship with all of the folks who have been using our logos and our branding. They're very conscious to come forward for the correct, most recent copy of something. A lot of this pertains to signage. If we're advertising for grants, we always ensure that we use the correct logo of the granting authority, and we just have the same mutual respect back and forth. To answer your question from the legal and the course, it would really depend on the infraction as to whether we wanted to get into a legal battle over it. To date, I don't know of any that have come forward, but I could certainly find that out if that was of interest to council.
Counselor Stashik, follow up.
If I could follow up. Yeah, I was kind of wondering if they're trademarked or copyright protected or anything like that. Because 4.5.1 does speak to individuals as well. And in the event that an individual chose to use town branding to create an impression that a document is supported by the town of Hinton, what the legal recourse would be in that event.
Ms. Borbeau.
Through to all of council, I would have to get back to you on that. I know that we do not have copyright protection on it. But we do have, one of the benefits of using local suppliers, as we do for a lot of it, is they have the current logos to be used, and there is an authorization process that they will go through that before they will put a logo on a piece of merchandise.
Okay, that's fine for now. I don't need any follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Borbeau. Thank you, Counselor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council approve the draft branding policy number 1207 as presented. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 6.3 on the agenda today? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.4, one-off financial request policy number adjustment. And back to Ms. Borbeau.
Thank you, council. I didn't realize all of these items were going to end on the same agenda. So earlier in, I believe it was 2023, the one-off financial request policy was developed to facilitate some of the requests that would come to council outside of budget season. At the time it was developed, it was done by the Community Services Department, but with the approval of the Corporate Liaison Coordinator position coming under the Corporate Services umbrella, we're simply requesting that we renumber this policy to align with the other financial policies that the organization has. So if the request is granted this evening, and it will go from being CS-7201 to FN-1500.
Thank you, Ms. Borbeau. Counselor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council approves the one-off financial request policy number change to FN-1500, please.
Thank you, Counselor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is that council approves the one-off financial request policy number change to FN 1500. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 6.4 on the agenda this evening? Councilor Race,
You have a question to administration about policy numbers.
go right ahead.
So CAO, a lot of municipalities are going to numbering their bylaws and policies using the new year and the month. I thought that was something we were giving consideration to.
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor and council, yes, Councilor Race, you're correct. That is, I would say, common practice now. The one problem with shifting over into doing that is it is a tremendous amount of work because there's no allowances through the legislation that you can just change your numbering system without bringing every single bylaw and policy back to council to approve it in the same form that you approved it originally. So that means every bylaw has to get another 3 readings at council, passed by council through policy. So it is something that we're aware of. And, if we were starting from scratch today, it would be wonderful to have, I think, a little bit more of a clear numbering system, but just due to the tremendous amount of work and competing priorities, we haven't done that yet.
Just makes me wonder how cities like Calgary can implement that. But maybe someday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Council, anything further for item 6.4 on the agenda? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.5, 2025 Supplementary Assessment Tax Bylaw number 2010. Ms. Borbeau.
Thank you. Last item for me this evening. So legislatively, the supplementary assessment bylaw must be passed before May 1st in the year in which it's to pertain to. What the supplementary bylaw allows us to do is create a little bit more of equity and fairness in some of the assessment of properties. As you know, we're always a year behind its market value of a property on the preceding July 1st, physical condition of the property as of December 31st. But say in the event there was a house under construction, its assessed value at the end of December the prior year could be substantially lower. And then at some point during the year, that house becomes completed and the family is able to move into it. So a supplementary assessment allows us to tax for the months in which that was a fully functioning and operational home that was able to be lived in. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Borbeau. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council gives first reading to the 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is the council gives first reading to 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010. Councilor Taylor.
Well, we see the financial implications of the special assessment. Potentially be able to adjust before we have to approve the tax rate bylaw.
Ms.
Do these things ever amount to much?
Ms. Borbeau.
Thank you for the question and through to all of council. The amounts have been, money is always important. I don't want to use negligible in the wrong term, but they have been on the lower value. There have been years where there have been more, but we can certainly make a note to bring that forward as to what the supplementary assessments were ending December 2024 and bring them forward prior to the tax rate being set.
Follow up, Councillor Taylor?
When you say lower value, what do you mean? What sort of value are you thinking of? 3, 4, 5, $600,000?
uh, Through to all of council. For 2024, they're going to be slightly on the higher end because of the building that was deemed not inhabitable in 2023. And then all of the permits and everything went through quickly and they had moved back in June of 2024, I believe. So we're seeing that little bit of larger assessment adjustment for all of those units. I don't have the total off the top of my head. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, last year in 2023, it was around $4,000.
Well, that's small. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. Council, the motion on the floor is that council gives first reading to 2025 supplementary assessment bylaw number 2010. Any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. We might need to reboot that one, Secretary. Everyone seems to be frozen up. We're going to resend the question out here. Okay, if councillors, if it's come up, please vote now. You're not getting, yeah, it's gotten real slow here. Okay, council, we're going to, oh. It's not. It's not working correctly now. Okay, council, we're going to do this vote by hand, and then we're going to take a 5-minute recess. So, council, the motion on the floor is the council gives first reading to 2025 supplementary assessment bylaw number 2010. All those in favor by hand. And that is carried unanimously, and council is going to take a 5-minute recess for fixing these technology issues. Thank you. And this regular council meeting for February 4th, 2025 will return to order at 5:07 PM. Council, we are on item 6.5, 2025 Supplementary Assessment Tax Bylaw number 2010. The last motion was to give first reading and it was carried unanimously. We're looking for a counselor to move for second. Counselor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council gives second reading to 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010.
Thank you, Counselor Ostashik. Council, the motion on the floor is the council gives second reading to 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Counselor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council gives unanimous consent to move to third reading of the 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010.
Thank you, Counselor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is the council gives unanimous consent to move to third reading of 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Counselor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council gives third reading to 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010.
Thank you, Counselor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is the council gives third reading to 2025 Supplementary Assessment Bylaw number 2010. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further for item 6.5 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.6, Bhutan Lands Seniors Housing Concept Financial Request, and Mr. Rousseau.
Council, thank you for the opportunity to bring this back to you, just to put it into perspective. On the 28th of January at the Committee of the Whole, we discussed this item about bringing forward a concept development for seniors housing, focusing on the Bhutan lands or part thereof. Just to give the context again in a little bit, that the Bhutan lands was purchased by the town for the purpose of a mixed type of development. We took into account the charrette that was done back in 2018 and beyond. We then came forward and said to move this project forward or the options forward, one of the aspects is seniors housing. And as we discussed last week, we said we will base it on, not that that is going to be the go forward model, but a life lease is one of the type of seniors housings that you could get. Just to give council an idea that you could have a life lease, or you could have apartments, you can have long-term care, you can have retirement homes. So this is just one extrapolation of a type of seniors housing that we could have. So I want to just stop there and open it up for questions that council may have for us.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Council? Councilor Magoon.
I guess one of the things that I've been thinking about since Committee of the Whole is sort of like a flow chart or a procedural perspective. Does this, and if so, how, offer us any benefits as opposed to putting out, say, like an RFP and going out to the market and trying to find a developer on the front end and saying, you know, our high level objective is seniors housing, but before we get into the details, you know, we'd like you to consider coming on board as a part. You know what I mean? I'm trying to understand if this is the best first step or not. And, you know, any details around that.
Mr. Rousseau?
Yeah, so through to the chair, to Councillor Magoon. The short answer is not to diminish what you're saying, but if we go RFP route, we likely can span it out to all of Alberta, if not further than that, and potential developers could come. The thinking behind what we have suggested to go forward with is that we have a concept that is being sort of outlined in this design charrette that we've done most of the work. However, we've put more legs below this in terms of defining it as to what it could be. So the sensitivity analysis we're talking about, since so much time has elapsed, is that you could look at the 800, 1,000, 1,200 square feet. What is that going to cost us to build? So having that information, we could still, after this, go through an RFP process to get that right partner to help us to bring this into being.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor.
Following up, I still don't quite get it, the order of things, right? To me, if we go spend 50,000 doing our, to go out and get a consultant before we've got somebody to partner with and have developed incentives in order to get that partner, then we're headed down the line of a very expensive public housing project, which the town at best can't afford. So at what stage do we get the private partnership involved? Because that's when we know when we're doing something practical. When people are going to invest their money in a project, they're the ones that really should have to say. I mean, I was part of that charrette thing. I saw the kind of people that we were getting advice from, and it wasn't developers or people that had large amounts of investment dollars. So how can you assure me that before we spend a significant portion of the $50,000, we've got a partner, or we've at least got good incentives to go out, maybe to Edmonton or something, to try to get a partner? I don't mind us trying to do something, but to do something and pretend we're doing something good unless we've got somebody that's going to spend private money is not useful to me.
Mr. Russo.
To the chair, to Councillor Taylor, the essence that we're seeking to achieve here is exactly that, to attract people to Hinton that is capable of delivering, likely managing the project for us, as well as looking at the future maintenance cost as well, because that is something that we often neglect to look at. What is the ongoing cost? So by having the incentives then properly laid out and including it into the RFP, or stating that, and by developing the plan here through a concept, we've got something to offer. But just saying we want to put an RFP out, the question is going to be, what do you want to build? And if we don't have that framework together, I believe personally that we're going to fall short of attracting that really true developers for them to get their teeth in. So what are the incentives for people to wanting to partner with the town of Hinton? We have to show them what we're seeking to achieve. That's why you'll see we did not go out to say we want to build 40 units on the entire piece of land. We are going to try and go and look at 5 to 10 units. Not that that's a scale that we want to work on, but at least you'll get a cost of 800, 1,100 and 1,200 square feet. That we can put out to market as in public knowledge, and every developer or builder can come to town and say, yes, how we see this work for the town is a sustainable model going forward.
How is that different? May I?
Go ahead.
How's that different than what we did in the charrette? Like, we got together, we got an outsider to come in, do some consulting work. We talked to a bunch of people. By and large, the development community in the town kept quiet because they don't sell their ideas for free. And we ended up with this plan, exclusive of any sort of investment committee. And then, unless you get somebody who knows how to do these things and make money close or near to the start, it just seems to be the same.
Mr. Russo.
Chair, to Councillor Taylor, it's not the same, Councillor Taylor. What the charrette has outlined, it gave you a pictorial view of people that gave input. No disrespect to those that gave input, but it wasn't an implementable plan. What you had was you could put storage unit here, but there was no outline of what the cost of services is going to be. There was a ballpark number that was given. Right now, we're drilling down to a specific area of interest and a need in the town. And that's the big difference, that we would be talking about specific what a house could look like. You'll see the 10,000 we're asking for is exactly to give you that streetscape idea in terms of an at grade 800 to 1,200 square feet.
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor, if I could just maybe add on a little bit to what Mr. Rousseau was saying, but a charrette is really a community document, and it's more of a visioning document of what could be. This is an actual concept plan of this is what we're looking at, because if we're going out to private partner and asking them to spend quite a bit of time to put forward a bid, these things take quite a bit of time and some money. We need to have some some defined parameters so they know what they're talking about. Because if we don't have any concept plan, we don't have any idea of what the costs are going to be. Really what we're doing is trying to get the private market to do all of that work for us. And I don't think we're going to get very many serious proponents putting in a bid if their responsibility is to do a lot of this foundational work that should have been done proactively. So by doing this work proactively, we have some answers. We have a little bit of skin in the game. We have a defined vision that we want to execute on, and then we go to the private industry. Because this land is not, our vision is not just any type of development that would, if our vision was just, we want a developer to go in and build houses, I think that would be one thing we probably could go to market at this point. But because we have a defined vision for seniors care within a certain model, a lot of those things should be flushed out beforehand.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things I'm looking at is on page 2 of 3 of the request for decision about the stakeholder workshop. And it says the industry specialist will facilitate a stakeholder workshop that includes representatives from the town, potential life lease participants, and possible operators. And then at the bottom of that, just below the description of service table, it says the proposed timeline for 1 and 2 is 90 days. Part 3 is proposed to be completed by the fall of 2025. So is it reasonable to assume that in fall of 2025, fall of this year that's coming up, we will have at that stakeholder workshop potential operators for or potential developers for this idea, this call it campus?
Mr. Rousseau.
Through to the chair to Councillor Magoon. The short answer is yes, that is the endeavor. That's why we said the potential partners.
Okay.
And we just want to be careful as to how we single out potential and that we keep it transparent and all inclusive. So the short answer is yes.
It may have
Go
a
ahead.
follow-up, Mr. Mayor, and I realize that it's not part of this particular RFD, but I'm just wondering about opportunities and economies of scale. As part of the town's communication process with potential partners or developers, is there an opportunity to communicate with them other developments that we've talked about strategically as a council that may make this area more desirable to say, well, look, it's not just a seniors campus that we're also looking at. The town has expressed interest in developing areas in terms of, say, apartment complexes, et cetera, bigger bang for the buck in this particular area. Is that something admin's planning on communicating as well?
Mr. Rousseau.
Through to the chair to Councillor Magoon. The short answer again is yes, because most of the lands that the town own, we've had public conversations about what our options could be. We just haven't landed on a proposed go forward. So we could broadly speak about that.
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I listen to Councillor Taylor, I don't disagree with the charrette. The charrette at the time was sold to us as, we build the concept and that will bring people in. And I think at the time, it may have, but a lot of things got in the way of that over time. It was, whether it was COVID, whether it was inflation, but this is the key though, that I think was missing from that charrette is the actual concept. As you said, it was a general look at, here's an area that has the potential for this, hoping that people would then grasp onto that as a developer and say, hey, Hinton's got a piece of land over there, we can do this in. But that didn't happen. And I think what I'm hearing is still using that charrette as a base, but having then those costs, taking that 50,000, building it even further into detail is what really is going to potentially attract that development, so if I, crystal ball, we would have done that earlier. Maybe that would have been a different story, but here we're at now. We were new landowners to that area. We were learning more. This was brought to us at the time. I think it gave a good look at it, but with this, $50,000, I think it'll set us up in a better place and bring those outsiders out for development. So with that, I'd like to make the recommendation, the council direct administration to proceed with the Bhutan Lands senior housing concept, including the funding of $50,000 from the municipal reserve as discussed. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to proceed with the Bhutan Lands senior housing concept, including the funding of $50,000 from the municipal reserve as discussed. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With 1, 2, and 3, we're looking at 90 days. Concept and design planning, when does that come into effect?
Mr. Rousseau.
So in short, Councillor Rice, through to the chair, that this comes into effect once we have the foundational work completed, i.e. we understand what it's going to cost us for square footage of X and X square footage of Y. So basically, the concept could be run after the stakeholder engagement has been done. Or we could run it parallel with 1 and 2 once 1 is complete. Not quite parallel with 1, but once 2 is complete. So that if we go to the stakeholder engagement, we have an outline, maybe not finalized yet, that the stakeholders can have a look at and likely bring in those type of developers that may have an interest in the town to build and partner.
Councillor Race, follow up.
So here's my concern. I really need something firm, like roots in the ground, by October. We've got an election this year. We may have new people sitting at this table who don't agree with this decision, and we've just spent $50,000. So, like, how far in can we go and be cemented before October?
Mr. Rousseau.
It's through to the chair, to Councillor Rice. That is exactly the expedition that we've taken, that we brought it in January 28th. Hopefully, if we do get a yes for tonight, that is the timeline that we are on, to have something by the end of September before the election is, that there's something that the council of today could at least stand on and say, okay, this has been put in motion, the next council can expedite or execute. That is the timeline that we've given ourselves, Ms. Webb and I.
Okay. Just one quick question.
Go ahead.
Do we have people in-house? You know, we've got some very, very smart people working for us here who are going to work alongside this person you want to hire.
Mr. Rousseau.
So through to the chair again, we do have very capable people, but our people are more generalist in terms of what they do. When it comes to housing specific, that the caliber of person that is the specialist we're seeking to harness here has the day-to-day understanding and the market pulse. And that's what's going to give us the edge to move this likely forward with a good speed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to proceed with the Bhutan Lands senior housing concept, including the funding of $50,000 from the municipal reserve as discussed. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Council, please vote now. That motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know I don't have to say this, but I always appreciate you guys coming, sitting up front, you know, to make sure that I'm hearing everything you say. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Thank you, Mr. Rousseau. Thank you, Ms. Weber. Council, is there anything further for item 6.6 on the agenda today? Seeing nothing, we'll move to section 7, correspondence. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I got a question in regards to the letter from our Honorable Todd Lowen to administration. So basically what I'm reading is we were not successful at this time to receive the grant that we've applied for, but they want us to resubmit a new plan. Is that what I'm reading?
CAO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I believe that this letter is just a general letter to all the applicants, maybe feigning some, the fact that he or the ministry would like some larger projects as a part of it. I'm not sure what the remedy is for this, but when we read this letter, I don't believe that this is specific to our application. Our application, because what he's asking for is just something bigger and very large scale fire guards. Our application was 3.3 million, and it's looking at a fire guard for the majority of town of about 250 meters. So this is we're well within the realm of what was requested here.
Okay, so to clarify then that this was just a kind of a form letter to inform all communities that applied for this. That's what they're expecting.
Through the mayor, that was my interpretation of it. I don't think it was specific to us or our application. I think it was just more of a general letter to the applicants.
Okay, so also, if I may, Mr. Rid, just
Go
to
ahead.
confirm, so no decisions have been made on that grant at this point then yet?
Through the mayor, we had submitted 3 free applications. One was for planning. Of that, we received that grant.
Okay.
The other one was for fire smarting or more cleanup vegetation management kind of within town. We were not approved for that. So the fire guard program that he's referring to in this letter is the one that's still outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oz. Thank you, CO Panasic. Councillor Taylor.
I take a different tack when I read this. I take the minister writing in the town of Hinton telling us that he wants us to take bolder and stronger actions to achieve these objectives. And I wouldn't just like fall asleep on this letter. I would write the minister back and ask him to engage us at a very high and strategic level to look at what we've done and what we can do with some of his very, very senior staff. You know, like, and even challenge the minister to do stuff that he could be doing, like how can we work better with West Fraser? What's the management on the crown lands outside the town of Hinton, and how's that going to mitigate fire? Well, substantially is none. So what are you going to do about that? And some of these other things. That's my tack. That's how I would take it with this letter. The fire threat is serious enough that, yeah, we'll accept your challenge and we really need your help. And we think there's things you have to do too. If nobody else feels the same, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council? Councillor Hotz.
Because it was mentioned about what grants we've received and what grants we haven't that we applied for. The one grant you mentioned was the cleanup inside our town boundaries. So through the budget process, we had earmarked $100,000 out of the safety reserve that if we are not successful in receiving the grants that we've applied for. So I guess my question then is, when does that trigger get pulled, you know, in regards to that work that can be done in regards to that $100,000 if we, because I think for me, that was one of the biggest things is clean up around our community, you know, in our forested areas and things like that. And hearing that we didn't get that grant, does that activate that $100,000 or are we waiting yet?
CO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, we were planning on bringing that item back to council until we heard back on the fire guard program. And we do have some other grants that we did apply for. We did apply for another $200,000 for residential sprinkler systems and home assessments. And we also applied for about another 47,000 for emergency management and signage and stuff like that. So we have a number of those, but I would say that the one that was brought forward by council through the budget season for that $100,000, the only one that we're waiting to hear back on is the fire guard program. So once we hear back, we can have that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Thank you, CO Panasic. Councillor Taylor.
I don't want to belabor the point, but $100,000 is a drop in the bucket in comparison to the size of the problem that we have. And it's well within the scope of most communities to be able to do anything effective from a fire smart point of view. Like, we're talking large chunks of forested land both within and outside the town of Hinton. And maybe the province can be helping us engage in an economic, selective log or salvage program within Hinton on their crown land, help us on our land, in addition to all these other things that I've mentioned. So that's the level of effort I think we want to engage them at to get something done.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So CAO, I think last year, this is what I think, is we were sitting at number 2 as far as fire hazard. So in 23, it was, 23, it was Yellowhead, 24, it was Jasper. We're right in the middle there. So do you know where our fire rating is? And does the government know?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council, I don't know what our specific rating is and who that rating agency is. I believe that at the time, that was the U of A who did that back in 2022, 2023, who rated communities, and they had us, I believe, in the top 3. I believe with recent events, we would likely be still top 3 or top 2.
So my wonder is if the government is looking at that rating too, that we should be kind of given top priority, sitting in that range. Okay.
Yeah, and through the mayor, I think that, the events of 2023 and 2024 are likely to put us at the top of that list. Like I mentioned before, we took I would say high risk, high reward stance when it came to fire guard programming for that reason, for $3.3 million for our fire guard. We also we're continuing to be in discussions and trying to get the actually Todd Lowen's ministry and transportation to go in there and re-clear the highway bypass. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to piggyback onto that work and stretch that quite a bit. Hinton is a little bit of an oval shape or a rectangular shape, and with the highway bypass, the new pipeline, and what our application is to clear in between those. It encompasses the vast majority that's not covered by the river in the town of Hinton. So I think we've taken some very bold steps, and this is I believe when I did my measurements, we were looking at about 250 meter guard for the vast majority of town if we're approved for this grant.
Go ahead, Councillor Race.
Through the mayor, yes, as a natural feature. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Thank you, CEO Panasic. I believe our Director of Community and Protective Services, Ms. Way, has something to add.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Councillor Taylor's question around potentially returning a letter to in response to the letter we received here today, just for council to be aware, we do have a meeting with our FRIA rep tomorrow. So we anticipate a little bit of movement or additional information forthcoming. So at this point, all the points spoken to in this letter, those items are specifically included in the application that we've put forward for the Fire Guard grant. So actually, upon receiving this, we saw this as a positive reflection of what we've submitted, but we'll know more hopefully before the end of the week.
Thank you, Ms. Way. Council. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council accept the correspondence packet for the regular meeting of council for February 4th, 2025.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council accept the correspondence package for information. And it will be up shortly. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. And CEO Panasic and Ms. Way, I'm sure you can make note, council is going to be very interested in that meeting with FRIA. That will take us to section 8 of our agenda this evening, notices of motion. CEO Panasic, are there any notices of motion this week?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have one. This is a motion by Councillor Ostashik that council directs administration to prepare a report for the committee of the whole meeting before the end of the first quarter of 2025 regarding the inclusion of a plebiscite on the construction or major reconstruction of a recreation center in Hinton to be conducted in conjunction with the Town of Hinton municipal election on October 20th, 2025.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Is that all for notices of motion this week?
That'll be everything.
Thank you very much. That will take us to section 9 and reporting and council reports. We'll start with Councillor Taylor. Nothing to report. Councillor Race. Councillor Haas.
Perfect. Just one quick thing. I want to just thank everybody that came out last Thursday to the Stephen Lee Olson show at the Path. It was a really exciting show. A lot of good feedback. It's like having your own private show. I know the gentleman goes to other communities, Edmonton being one of them, but to be able to sit in front of an act like that, two talents like that in our community is amazing. So I hope that in the future, when we have those acts, that we get more people coming out, and filling the stands to watch those shows. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a DMO meeting last week. Unfortunately, the chair for the DMO has had to step down. He's leaving the community, so the DMO board is appointing a new chair. The other takeaway from that meeting is that the DMO continues to develop their branding and their advertising. And I just want to encourage anybody, council for sure, administration, anybody who might be listening, if you haven't checked out the website yet, go check out the website. It is a pretty amazing, comprehensive website about what's available in Hinton, things to do. And even as a local, I spent a lot of time on there. It's huge. I spent a lot of time out there on there, and I learned several things that even as a local who's lived here my whole life that I didn't know. It's hintonrockies.com. Very easy. Go check it out. There's lots of interesting stuff on there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. hintonrockies.com for anyone listening. Councillor Taylor.
Is that a site that, you type in Hinton tourism or something like that, and you're a international traveler you're drawn to?
Councillor Ostashik.
That what the results are showing, that it's getting good feedback that way?
Yeah, if I may, at the DMO reports, all of the, I don't know the terminology for website visits and different social media sites, but all of that's tracked, all of that's reported, and their numbers are outstanding. They use those numbers to analyze what's working, what's not working, and how to direct funding and how to attract different people to the different media sites. And I wish I had the numbers here that I could quote them for you. I could probably get them, but the numbers of visitors and where they're coming from and the time that they stay on the website is one thing that I do remember from the meeting. Visitors to the web page are staying for extended periods of time. I think it was in excess of 6 minutes probably, which is an abnormally long amount of time for somebody to spend on a website. If you'd like, I can get that information and forward it to council, but yeah.
Councillor Taylor, any more?
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. And that will take me to myself for reporting. This is something I learned today. Wednesday, February 5th is Winter Walk Day in Alberta. It's a province-wide initiative since 2006. On the first Wednesday of every February, Albertans bundle up and head outside for a 15-minute walk. So get out there and walk tomorrow. Additionally, February is a very exciting month in the town of Hinton. From February 7th, that's this Friday, till the 23rd, we have our Winter Magic Festival. That kicks off, as I said, Friday with the Hawaiian Luau dance put on by FCSS at the Hinton Center. On the 8th, we've got the Growler Fat Bike Race. And of course, go to hinton.ca to find out more about the Winter Festival, Winter Magic Festival events going on in town over the next few weeks. On February 8th, we've got a Fire Smart open house again at the Hinton Center from 1 p.m. or 1 to 6 p.m. On February 10th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m., there is a Resilience Institute event being put on in conjunction with the town about the potential effects of climate change on our community. That is a virtual event, and you can go to hinton.ca to register. And then on February 22nd, we've got the Coldest Night of the Year walk. The town has put in a team, and councillors are welcome to join. That is in our inboxes now. Councillor Taylor, you have something further to add?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, Councillor Taylor's good. And with that, we will go to CAO Panasic reporting.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing to report.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. That will take us to section 10 of our agenda this evening. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we go into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council move into closed session at 5:42 p.m. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Ostashik voting in favor by hand, along with Councillors Race and Taylor, and that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody.